Hello.
Hello, good morning, good evening, wherever you are.
Hello.
It is early evening here. It's 5 p.m. for me. How about
Okay.
you?
Yeah, I woke up at 5:30 a.m. today to talk to a bunch of people in Sweden. I'm located in Seattle, so it's 8 a.m. for me now.
Oh, wow. So you already have half a day behind
Yes,
you.
kind of. Yeah,
I admire your commitment.
thanks. I try not to make it happen too frequently. Hey, Mauricio.
Hey folks,
Hey, Mauricio.
how are you, Leon?
Colin. Hi, Mark. Good.
Mark, morning.
Hello.
My day off. Today there was sunshine all day, so it's like biking a bit. It was nice.
Cool.
Very good.
How are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you. Yes.
It's been a while since we talked, right? We saw each other at KubeCon last time.
Yes, it was I think it was KubeCon last year
I think it was in Paris.
or Paris, yeah.
Which feels like a year ago, yeah. Let's give it like maybe 4 more minutes. I just want to make sure everyone's got some time, and I also will post again in the Slack.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, hi, Jochen. Sorry, didn't even see you. Just snuck in. And Robert was also
Yes, I snuck in. I was kind of doing something on the side, so.
all good, all good. I'm glad to see so many people interested. I am the only person I'm kind of like waiting for right now. Oh, actually, you know what? I will appoint Dylan if you can to take notes because I know that Robert can't right now. And I was gonna wait for Sarah, who's running a bit late, but since you're here,
That's okay.
I will
I
just.
already put my name down, so.
Oh, you did? Oh, wow. Okay. Why am I even waiting? All right. Thank you so much. Great. Okay, then let's just get started with the meeting. Welcome everyone. It's really great to see so many people interested. Yeah, so this is our general meeting of the Tag App Delivery, where we discuss things that are generally related to app delivery, cloud native app delivery. You can bring up any topic really that is related to this field. And also we today have a presentation by the Diagrid folks on Dapper, which we will get to in a moment. Before we do that, I just want to do a quick checkup with the working groups if there's anything that they want to share with the bigger group. So I'll just call out to the working groups, and if you have something, please share. If not, then that's also fine. So I'm going to start with platforms. I don't know if Robert is able to say anything.
I just got home and I got a crazy dog, so I need a couple more minutes.
Okay, fine. Okay, then let's move on to artifacts instead. I'm not sure if someone's here from the artifacts working group. I don't think so. Okay, infrastructure lifecycle. I guess that would be you, Dylan.
I can give an update here. So I'm one of the co-chairs.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course.
No worries. Kind of, we need to get used to the faces, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are currently working on a blog post which we are discussing within the chairs, and also Bruno was working on the website to be updated, and we hope that we have that done by the meeting on Friday, or we'll just discuss it on Friday and then get started there on the actual work. That's kind of a small.
Yeah, excellent. I am very interested to read it. I saw also that Abby was giving you some pointers, which is great.
Yes.
Cool. All right, Robert, are you done greeting the dog? I know it takes some time to do that.
Well, she's on top of me right now, but at least she doesn't whine. I don't have too much of an update from the platform side. There is still just work being done with the platform as a product white paper and things like that. And I think most of the chairs basically just working on getting all the different procedures and stuff like that in place. And we're currently trying to swap me out with Atul, which is we have set up a meeting that kind of crosses the various time zones that we now are in. Used to be so nice, but mostly Europeans. Now we're spread across the world, so we have to take that into account as well. But so we're gonna have some sort of like handoff meeting, hopefully, really soon. And yeah, that's basically.
Excellent. Well, congratulations to Atul, who's not on the call right now, but really happy for him, and also that you don't have to do everything. It's gonna hopefully be. Oh my God. Oh, it's so cute.
There you go. This is what I'm doing.
All right, you are forgiven. Cool. Okay. I think we can just start with the Dapper presentation, and then if anyone else has any other topic they want to discuss, you can add them to the agenda. I think everyone should have editing rights. I'm gonna just post it again in the meeting chat, and then we'll see if we can make time for the discussion. And with that, I will hand it over to whoever wants to present. And please let me know if I need to give you presentation rights. I'm not quite sure. I know I have the power to do it, but I'm not quite sure how to do it.
Jeroen was going to do the
Yeah,
presentation.
I'm going to present, and I think I can actually share, so we should
Oh,
be good.
excellent.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here. My name is Jeroen Schneider. I'm a CTO and co-founder at Diagrid. Before starting the company in January of 22, I spent 6 years at Microsoft, where I mostly focused on open source tech and serverless container platforms. I created the KDA project together with Red Hat pretty early on, donated that to CNCF, then stepped down from being a KDA maintainer to co-create Dapper together with Mark here, who's on the call. And yes, today we are working with a lot of major companies worldwide about their open source Dapper and KDA adoption. So really, really happy to be here and showcase Dapper, as we think it's a very application-focused technology. So I'm just gonna share my slides, and I do not see people's faces while I'm presenting, so feel free to interrupt me.
I'll just do a 30-second intro as well. So my name's Mark Fussell. Works alongside Jeroen here at Microsoft, where we kind of created Dapper together, founded Diagrid with him as well, and spent 20+ years working on distributed systems platforms in Azure before we founded Diagrid.
Yep. So Mark and I are Dapper maintainers. I'm a maintainer of the core runtime of the project, and we're both also steering committee members. And as I said, feel free to stop in the middle, or we can take questions at the end. It's all good. Okay, so what is Dapper? Dapper is a set of APIs for building microservices and tackling the complexity of building distributed systems. If you look at this blueprint here, it's very generic. You have a bunch of services here, maybe a mobile device, a web application talking to a bunch of services. You can call it a microservices application, distributed monolith. Each one of these can be their own monolith. It doesn't matter. It's some sort of a system with multiple services. And they're talking to either a storage backend, a database, a message broker. There's probably a secret store, a configuration store somewhere on here that's not mentioned. But, you know, this is a pretty generic blueprint. But when you get down the details of it, there's lots of challenges with writing these cloud native services, as most of us know. For example, how do you orchestrate your business logic across multiple services in a highly distributed environment? How do you make sure that they're fault tolerant and resilient, that they pick up from where they last left off? What happens if something crashes? How do you rehydrate the state and move it on? How do you make sure that the entire workflow finishes end to end? Or, you know, if you're working around observability in your platform, how do you trace everything that's going on through your system, not only between services calling other services, but also between asynchronous types of communication? So imagine a message coming in from Kafka or RabbitMQ or SQS. And today, everyone is working in an environment where these technologies change. And in the multi-cloud world, there's a lot of them. So how do you make sure that you observe all of these different message brokers end-to-end with a message that's coming asynchronously into your app, and then transitioning to a synchronous workflow and making its way into your database in the end? How do you track that end-to-end? How do you ensure access control? Again, not only between services communicating with other services, but also between your applications and their infrastructure. How do you enforce zero trust from the application perspective, where you can basically specify, hey, I only want these applications to talk to this message broker on this specific topic, or I only want these applications to be able to write to that specific table in my PostgreSQL or MySQL database. So access control is much more than just service communication. It really spans your entire infrastructure between your applications and your associated infrastructure. And in terms of resiliency, again, there's things like, you know, timeouts, circuit breakers, and retries. They're very hard to get right at scale, especially circuit breakers. And again, developers are being tasked with making sure that their actual infrastructure doesn't just fall off or die down if there's more load than they've anticipated. So putting circuit breakers in front of, again, message brokers, secret stores, configuration stores, caches, databases, and their growing variety is a pretty hard problem, as circuit breakers, they're just not enough for just service-to-service calls. And so a lot of these problems are solved by Dapper. Dapper is a set of APIs here in the mid layer. There are 10 of them today and growing. And these APIs basically allow developers to focus on their business logic and the IP and essentially what's important for them, instead of the infrastructure interaction when they're trying to interact with their respective infrastructure dependencies. So we have a lot of these APIs. I'm not going to cover all of them in depth today. We have workflows, which if you're familiar with something like Temporal, it's basically a workflows as code, where you can basically specify things like send an email, orchestrate a parallel call to 5 different services, do a map reduce, then sleep for 1 month, and then send off a notification, and the workflow will run to completion. We have PubSub, which allows developers to write event-driven applications without needing to go into details like offsetting consumer groups, partitioning handling, fault tolerance with PubSub. It basically just abstracts all of the hard stuff away from them. External configuration allows developers to get notified whenever a configuration changes for their application. Secrets allows them to fetch secrets easily. Cryptography allows them to encrypt and decrypt data. State management allows them to create multi-tenant applications. So if you're using Dapper to front your database, Dapper can actually make sure that different applications can only see their own data. Actors is a programming model that's associated with gaming and IoT-based scenarios. And then also create leader election architectures very easily with as little as 3 lines of code, basically just doing distributed locks. Service invocation is the last API here that's kind of overlapping a little bit with a service mesh. Dapper has an application level service discovery. We'll get to that. And you can really come into Dapper from any language. It does not operate at the network level. Dapper is an API server. You can call it via HTTP or gRPC. So as long as you're using an application that supports HTTP or gRPC, which it probably is, it probably does, you should be able to use Dapper. And Dapper also provides cross-cutting concerns. We will deep dive into that. And it can run as a process on your local machine, Mac, Windows, Linux. It can run on a VM, and it's also very tightly integrated with Kubernetes today. So Dapper essentially runs by default as a sidecar, or it cannot actually edit this today. Thanks to the efforts of Mauricio Salaboy, Dapper supports now a shared model where it does not have to run a sidecar. But essentially, Dapper is very flexible on hosting because, as I mentioned, it does not operate at the network level or at the kernel level. It operates at the application level, which means you can remotely host it even as a serverless offering if you wanted to. And so in Kubernetes, the default mode is to run a Dapper process inside of a pod next to your application. So each one of these services will get their own Dapper sidecar, which is very good for high availability and avoiding single point of failures. And the Dapper sidecar will basically front all of the interactions between the application and its associated infrastructure, whether it's a database or a PubSub. So Dapper provides us with security, resiliency, and observability capabilities. But what does that actually mean? We'll deep dive into that in a second. These are the really cross-cutting concerns that we're looking at from the platform perspective. How does Dapper help make our infrastructure more resilient to failures, more observable, without developers needing to stitch in specific instrumentation for metrics and tracing in their code, and additional security primitives that we can apply to the database message broker or secret store that we're using that's going to make it even more secure. In terms of application developers, they're really able to speed up their development because Dapper offers them a set of APIs that basically abstract the common challenges across state workflows and service-to-service communication or service-to-PubSub communication. The goals of the project are really to provide these integrated set of APIs for developers, support any language or framework, so become extremely inclusive for any developer coming from any background to be able to use it. The goal of the project is really to encapsulate best practices and standards. So from the platform world, if you're looking at platform engineering, for example, is something that provides golden paths for infrastructure provisioning and monitoring. Dapper really provides that missing link for providing the golden paths to how to interact with said infrastructure. Another goal of the project is to become platform agnostic. It runs great on Kubernetes, but it shouldn't only have to run on Kubernetes. Anywhere where you can actually run a binary or make an HTTP call into can essentially be a Dapper hosting environment. We want the project to be extensible and pluggable. So if organizations like enterprises have proprietary systems that they want to hook into Dapper, we don't want them to need to upstream or contribute the code to their proprietary system upstream. We have a way to write private pluggable components that can run on-prem or in your environment without contributing that code upstream. And then, of course, part of CNCF, be community driven and vendor neutral. So at this point, you might be thinking, hey, does Dapper actually replace my database or my pub sub? When the answer is no. What makes Dapper easy to adopt is that it actually integrates with almost whatever it is you're running today. Dapper has over 120 community contributed components for each one of the APIs I mentioned earlier. So if you're running on AWS, for example, you can configure it to work against DynamoDB. And the platform infrastructure team at any point can just switch out DynamoDB for Postgres or MongoDB or Redis, and the code in your application does not change. So this is not only useful for multi-cloud scenarios where you need to deploy your application into multiple hosting environments, but this is also useful in terms of, let's say, insurance against failures of infrastructure in the future. Let's say you bet on one technology and 6 months down the line, it proved itself to not work out very well for you. And now you need to rip it out of your entire code base. That could be something that could take months to years, depending on your initial level of investment. But with Dapper, you can actually replace that within minutes. The Dapper APIs. So this is essentially how you'd call Dapper. Pretty simple. You have your application here on the left, no opinions whatsoever in terms of where it's being run and how it's being run. And then you have the Dapper process here on the right. We used to have the text say Dapper sidecar, but it doesn't have to be a sidecar anymore. As long as you can perform any HTTP or gRPC call, you should be good to go. And all of these different APIs are encapsulated into RESTful APIs and also gRPC equivalents. Not going to cover the gRPC here, but for every API that Dapper has that you're going to see here in HTTP, there is a typed protobuf equivalent that you can just create a gRPC client for. Or we have also 5 different SDKs that are thin wrappers around these gRPC libraries that make consuming Dapper even easier. So you can go to npm do npm install Dapper, get it off of Maven, NuGet, whatever your language of choice is. So this line here, for example, is how you do application level service discovery within the cluster and even cross cluster. So at this point, you can say, hey, Dapper, I want you to find the cart service that's running either in my cluster or in a different cluster, and just call the order RESTful method on it. This is a way to basically get state, item 50 in this case, to a state store called inventory. And remember, as a platform or infrastructure engineer, you can essentially just switch Dapper to work against any sort of database in your hosting environment. This is an example for how to publish a message. This is an example for how to fetch a secret from a secret store called Vault, which could be representative of, HashiCorp Vault, AWS KMS, Azure Key Vault, whatever it is you're using. And this is an example of how to start a workflow, which is currently in beta. And this is too many animations. Okay, I think I'm done here with animations. This would be an example for a typical, usage of Dapper. You don't have to use all of the Dapper APIs together. You can pick them off one by one. It's very good for incremental adoption. So, this would be an example of something that's coming in through an input binding trigger. This might be a binding that you set up with Dapper for, a cron job, or anytime there's a message coming in from AWS SQS. And then application A will essentially fetch a secret, publish a message through Dapper to a message broker of your choice, which can be one of many. Dapper supports over 20 today, I think. Then you'll have a different app subscribing to it, writing the state, or publishing to a different binding. And then application A can also use Dapper Service Discovery to invoke a different app, which then fetches configuration. You get the gist. It's basically a tool set for developers with all of these different APIs. This is an example of what the swappable component model looks like. This is a local dev. You might be starting out, developing your application locally with Dapper, where it's very easy to just do Docker on Redis and use Docker to run Redis and talk to it instead of using AWS SQS. But in your staging dev or production environment, you might be using a totally different store that's not as easy to use locally. So instead of spinning things up like emulators or very expensive infrastructure to basically reach into the cloud, you can just get started with any database that runs best for your local machine. And then when you deploy to the cloud, for example, in here, AWS, you can actually switch the Redis PubSub to AWS SQS, and the in-memory Dapper state store to AWS DynamoDB, and the local secret store that Dapper provides for development to the AWS Secrets Manager. Your code remains exactly the same, while only the YAML that creates the connection towards this underlying infrastructure is what changes. Then if you want to deploy to Azure, you basically configure Dapper to work against the Azure equivalents, and same with Google Cloud. Or if you're a Kubernetes only shop and you've decided to become extra brave and run all of your stateful workloads on Kubernetes, using RabbitMQ with stateful sets or Redis and stateful sets, and HashiCorp Vault, for example, you can do that too. So we talked about cross-cutting concerns before, and let's dive into what they actually mean. So this is security. Security is encapsulated in Dapper for basically creating encryption when Dapper is used to talk between one service and the other. This is very much like a service mesh, nothing special here, really. But Dapper also has access policies. So it allows you not only to choose which apps can talk to whatever other apps, but it can also allow you to specify access policies for what type of database, message broker, configuration store, secret store, or any third-party provider you can actually hook into. And this is configured via a pretty simple YAML where you can say, hey, I want to target PubSub, I want to target service invocation, and then basically tell Dapper which underlying infrastructure or service it can actually talk to. And yeah, this is another example where you can create trust domains. So Dapper basically allows you to specify something like, hey, I have one trust domain, and I want to make sure that in this trust domain, this app can talk to this database and this message broker and this other app. And it cannot talk to any infrastructure that's actually in a different trust domain. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in how you actually define the logical boundaries of your apps and infrastructure. In terms of observability, Dapper does tracing here. It works with the OTel specification, so you can hook up Dapper into any OTel endpoint that you have. The Open Telemetry Collector, Datadog, Dynatrace, anything that supports OTel can ingest both Dapper traces and metrics, which are not shown here. This gives developers the ability to make sure that they have full end-to-end distributed tracing without needing to pull in different SDKs into the applications, without needing to understand spans or contacts or W3C contacts, pulling them from metadata into request handlers and all of that stuff. This is essentially encapsulated from a developer for the most part. And Dapper will actually also give you some golden metrics. So if you're using Dapper to talk to your PubSub, database configuration store, secret store, or cache, it'll give you requests per second, latency, and error rates out of the box for each infrastructure that you're using across any of the supported 120 components that it supports today. In terms of resiliency, you can, as I mentioned before, for example, put a circuit breaker in front of a database. So if you have a lot of application hitting the same state store, you can actually open the circuit and just make sure that the database does not get overloaded. Of course, these circuit breakers apply to any type of infrastructure that Dapper supports. So you can put it in front of a state store, PubSub, secret store, etc. This also works the other way around. So for example, if you set up Dapper as a cron job to basically invoke your app, let's say every 5 seconds, and your app picks up on some work to do, and then it becomes unresponsive, you can actually tell Dapper, hey, ease off, back off, there's back pressure being applied here, don't invoke my application because it's doing something else, and Dapper will essentially start, transitioning traffic back into your application as it becomes available. Invocation, this is for service invocation. So, if two services are talking, one becomes unavailable. You can, if you know how the target service basically behaves, then you can set, static retries and timeouts. But then again, you can also put circuit breakers to account for situations where the app suddenly becomes unresponsive and you don't want to overload it. This is an example of resiliency for PubSub. So again, you can apply this both to outbound calls, meaning to published messages for the message broker, and also when messages are being pulled from the message broker and delivered into your application. So you can actually protect both the infrastructure and your application consuming from that infrastructure, either separately or at the same time. Dapper can run anywhere, runs best on Kubernetes today, but there are a few managed services that actually run it today in a serverless way. It can also run on virtual or physical machines. Anywhere you can run a Dapper binary. Dapper is written in Go, very small, lightweight binary. You can just run it in whatever platform architecture you want, ARM. Yes, so we support everything. Okay, Dapper community. We today, according to the CNCF Velocity Report, the 14th largest project, we have 120 community components, over 500,000 Docker Hub pulls per month, about 300,000 unique doc views per month. We use Scarf, that's available to CNCF projects. If you have a CNCF project, by the way, and you're not familiar with Scarf, they actually have a contract, I think now, with the Linux Foundation. I highly recommend putting it on your docs because it can give you a lot of insights into how users are using them. So call out to Scarf here. GitHub stars are vanity metrics, but the most important thing for us as maintainers is definitely the number of individual contributors. We are very happy with this number that is continuously growing. We have about 7.7K Discord members, coming up at 8,000 now. Some of our notable end users, the best deployment for Dapper that we like is one by NASA. Dapper is actually being run in the International Space Station right now as the ultimate edge deployment on the International Space Station to do PubSub in an OpenShift cluster, I think. There's actually a video that's showing that, which is pretty cool. So we talked about the Dapper APIs and their cross-cutting concerns. This is what it looks like from a high-level bird's point of view. You have the cross-cutting concerns, you have all of the APIs that apply to them, and Dapper is being used as the glue between your different applications and the associated infrastructure. I'm not going to go into all of the Dapper APIs. We are nearly done here, so we can take it up for questions. I will just cover, out of the 10 APIs, 3 major ones. So if you're wondering what users are using the most, it's PubSub, workflows, and service invocation. There's definitely a lot of usage for all of the other APIs too, but these are the main ones. So PubSub, Dapper, as we've established, integrates with many PubSub and queues. It actually provides a topic-based mechanism on top of something that would otherwise be a queuing mechanism, which is interesting. And now in the latest Dapper release, you can actually treat topic-based mechanisms as queues, because we allow you to actually pull now with something called streaming subscriptions. Dapper guarantees at least once delivery. It has the ability to subscribe uniformly to whatever message broker you're using, either through a declarative subscription, which is a YAML, or through your application code, whatever you like most or prefer. You can have content-based routing. You can have dead letter topics used with Dapper, even if the underlying PubSub does not support it. Dapper actually still allows you to set dead letter topics. And then you can apply access policies across all of your PubSub infrastructure, and it can get pretty granular. With Kafka, for example, you have topic-based authorization. Not all PubSub providers have that. I think RabbitMQ is very challenging to do that, but if you pair up Dapper and RabbitMQ, you get that very easily. It's literally a one line of YAML where a platform engineer can basically say, hey, only these apps can publish messages to these topics and subscribe to these other ones. And this is what it looks like. You can set up any message broker to be provided by Dapper. You have the publisher and the subscriber. This is what the APIs would look like. On the left here is publishing a message to Dapper, and the only thing required from the subscriber side is to expose an HTTP endpoint where Dapper will essentially send the message to. This is one way to subscribe to messages. As I said, you can also do it with gRPC, and today we also have streaming subscriptions where you don't actually have to have any endpoint in your application. You can just pull messages from Dapper using gRPC. And then, of course, you get automatic cloud events with Dapper and observability. So Dapper will make sure that your infrastructure interaction is observable using tracing and metrics. This is how you would actually provision a Dapper component. So it's a simple YAML file. You look at the type here. It says PubSub Redis. If you wanted to switch that out to Kafka, it would just be pubsub.kafka, and the metadata would change accordingly from Redis host to Kafka brokers or whatever equivalent is. And this is essentially the only thing you need to do. Service invocation, this one kind of overlaps with the service mesh, but it also differentiates itself in the fact that you can hook up different third-party service discovery mechanisms to Dapper. So Dapper will essentially discover other services in your cluster or in other clusters and allow you to invoke them via gRPC and HTTP, providing mutual authentication, built-in distributed tracing and metrics. What distinguishes Dapper here is that you can tell Dapper to use a DNS provider like, AWS Cloud Map, for example, if you have a pluggable component for it, or Console. And then you can let a third-party service do the service discovery for you, and Dapper can basically just ride on top of whatever you already have for service discovery, and then layer these layer 7 guarantees on top of it, like mutual authentication, tracing, and metrics. So on Kubernetes, we use Kubernetes DNS by default, but as I said, you can actually opt out of it and plug in different DNS resolution components. This is what it looks like. You have customer app, checkout app. You basically use Dapper to invoke. You can use Dapper DNS on Kubernetes by default. If you're running Dapper on VMs or locally, it will actually use a file-based approach where you can basically just give it access to a shared file, and Dapper will automatically manage the registration of the different services as they come up and go down. And we also have a multicast DNS resolution, so Dapper can provide service discovery across networks that support multicast DNS. So this gives you a lot of flexibility in being able to opt out from Kubernetes service discovery into more appropriate platforms if in case they're needed. This is just an example of how you do service discovery with Dapper. Again, there is no Dapper SDK in this case. It's just raw HTTP. It's what you know and love in your language of choice. Of course, instead of talking to the target service directly and hard coding that address or creating a virtual service for it, you just always talk to your Dapper endpoint, and then in the header you provide the target ID of the service that you want to discover, and Dapper will route the traffic to it and add all of the other primitives to it. Cool. So that was service discovery. I'm just gonna move on very quickly to workflows here. Let me find that one real quick. We have 106. Yeah, here it is. We have 106 slides on here, which is a lot. Dapper workflows, and beta and upcoming building block for basically workflow orchestration. And this allows you to author workflows in C#, Java, Python, or JavaScript and achieve very complex patterns. What you can do, for example, is create the following application. You can receive a message off of PubSub. This doesn't have to be through Dapper, by the way. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. And this will kick off a workflow where you have one activity that can fetch a secret, again, with or without Dapper. Then you want to wait for an event. This can be sleeping for a year even to wait for some external event. And then you want to kick off two parallel activities, one to store the result in a database and the other to invoke a service, do some sort of like map reduce on the fly, and then finally go into a separate activity which will publish a message to a downstream subscriber and end the workflow. And if any one of these activities basically fails, Dapper will pick up where it's left off. It will save the state and it will rehydrate it and continue from where it left off and make sure that it runs to completion. And if it doesn't, it will alert you. Task chaining is one of the patterns you can achieve, which, very simple. You have a bunch of sequential activities that you can invoke with inputs, gather the outputs, and then move on to task chain to the next activity in the chain. You can also do fan in, fan out, where you execute a bunch of activities in parallel, gather the results, and then aggregate them, save them to a database, send them to PubSub, whatever you want to do. Monitor should be very familiar. Because this is essentially the Kubernetes API server. So, you can create like a recurring timer that basically picks up on a resource and notifies you when it changes. So this is a way to create these abstracted periodical reminders that check on the status of a system and then perform an action based on that. So very easy to write reconciliation-based systems on top of the monitor platform here. External system interaction is the ability to do whatever you want in your workflow, but then just stop the world waiting for an external event. And this external event can be either, human intervention, or it can be any signal coming in from any system that you have, and then just kicking off the workflow when the event is set to continue the flow of events. Okay, so I think I'm just about done here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can take questions.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Yes, so if you have any questions, I'm not gonna call out. Just unmute yourself and try and be graceful with your fellow meeting attendees so we don't talk over each other. Do we have any questions?
We covered a lot there. So, I mean, we can
sure.
reach all the way back to the very beginning and, discuss sort of the things, whether you want to talk about the growth of the community or the sort of end user scenarios that we've built with, or, the history of Dapper or anything else like this.
What are you going to focus on next would be my question. What's on your roadmap for the next 6 to 12 months, I guess?
Yeah, so a lot of users have been telling us that they want Dapper to be able to handle SQL state better, because Dapper State API is really geared towards key value interactions today, and users want to see us being able to handle complex SQL scenarios. Being able to make workflows as stable is definitely important. It was beta up until now, and we see a lot of companies wanting to take this into production sooner rather than later. So making sure that it's stable and that it adheres to all of the stable guarantees that Dapper has is definitely important. Making sure that Dapper integrates with more DNS resolution components is also something that's important. Making sure pluggable components are applicable to more languages is also something that users have been asking for. And yes, there's a lot of community asks. We actually have a roadmap item that shows all of that, but I would say these four probably are top ones.
I have a question. Do you have a
Yes.
governance model for how community contributions are accepted or as plugins, right? It seems like there's a static set of types that are available. Right? So what does that look like?
Yeah, so we have contributor guidance, and the contributor guidance essentially means, hey, if you want to contribute a new component, first of all, make sure there's no component that exists today, and then open an issue, get a response from maintainers, achieve, consensus on the design principles, and once that is triaged by the maintainer and approved, then the contributor can be assigned to start working on that. And that essentially involves contributing the code, an associated set of tests, and documentation to make sure that people actually know how to use what you contributed.
Okay, and then as new features in whatever that thing come up, right? It would be continuous community contribution to keep up to date.
Yes, yeah. We have a set of maintainers for every one of the 32 repositories that we have in the Dapper org today. So maintainers are essentially, the last line of defense, so to speak, in terms of making sure that these components are being kept, updated with the latest SDKs, patch their CVs and whatnot. But a lot of our contributors are encouraged to come back and just make recurring updates, and that's what we're seeing.
And the components go through a life cycle as well, which is important. So they start off in an alpha and then go through beta and things like this. So, once they get to a stable status, it's responsibility of the whole maintainers in a project to make sure that they remain in a stable state.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Colin. Do we have any more questions? I'm not going to hold you off too long. I want to give people some space for questions. Where would it be best to reach you if I wanted to become part of your community, talk to other maintainers and users?
Yeah, great question. So we have a Discord community where you can join. There's a bunch of channels. There's an introduction channel. Maintainers basically hang out there. We also have a maintainers channel. And we can also answer via email. We have a CNCF mailing group for Dapper. For all of the maintainers, which is dapper@dapper.io. So if you want to become involved or ask questions, you can just email that specific group. And otherwise, you can just open an issue on the community repository where we can basically answer your questions.
Yeah, the Discord community is pretty active. That's the main place to go to. Yeah, so we just encourage everyone to join Discord community, introduce themselves, and then it's kind of split up into a general channel if you don't know where to go, and then channels for each one of the sort of SDKs or whichever one of the APIs you want to talk about or dive into like a platform. So, it's a pretty active place to go to.
Excellent. All right, thank you so much. So if you have more questions that you don't have couldn't think of right now, then go to the Discord, check out the website and the project. Thank you so much, guys, for coming in and presenting.
Was? Yep, happy to be here.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna give the word to someone else from Diagrid now. We haven't heard enough from you guys. No, Mauricio, you added
Yep.
a point to the agenda, which is for the app development working group.
Yeah, exactly. So this is not about Dapper. This is about the development working group, and I'm sharing kind of like the link here in the chat. And this is basically something that we have been working on with the working group, because before starting writing any white papers, we thought about creating a survey that we want to run during KubeCon North America and KubeCon India, just to gather information about which tools in the CNCF landscape are being used by developers attending these events. And with the group, we are planning to use the information that we can gather from that survey to define kind of like the next steps and where to focus. Like if we start writing a white paper, where to put the focus on. And we thought about like sharing the link here with this audience and this group, because we need feedback before putting anything live that it's going to be promoted by the CNCF and by the working group. So if you have any spare time, please check that link. Look at the questions that we're asking in the document. We have a brief section at the beginning of the document that explains why we are doing this. I think that with the working group, that's what we're going to be focusing on the next couple of weeks, to make sure that the reason behind the survey is clear. And we wanted to also invite folks from the projects that are being mentioned in the survey to review these and to review kind of like some other work that we are doing there in the working group. I can see that Daniel is here as well from the working group. Daniel is also a co-chair. So Daniel, if you have any other thing that you want to add about the stuff that we're running, feel free to do so.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so you are covering everything we needed to. Yeah, so this survey is super helpful for our working group to make it better and understand how developer actually try to run through and have some hands-on experience with like a graduate CNCF projects.
And I wanted to ask Leanne, do you have like we created kind of like an issue already into the service desk of CNCF to see if we can run this survey via like the official channels? And I think that we're getting good feedback, right? Do you have any news
Yes.
from that side?
The last thing I got was that Katie was asking when we want to run it.
Okay.
That's the last thing I heard. But it seems to me like she's on it.
Perfect.
That's all I have.
Yeah, so we need to do some chasing there, but the idea is just to publish it during KubeCon North America and KubeCon India as well, just to share with people, like with a QR code or something that people can fill it up, and then just collect all the information after KubeCons and see how do we create a report about the survey, but also how do we start writing white papers around that space. I think that was pretty much it, like just asking for feedback for people coming from different working groups.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm just gonna check the ticket just to make sure that I actually replied to her, but I'm 99.9% sure that I did. So. In the meanwhile, I don't think anyone else has added any agenda points, but we still have 12 minutes. So if someone's desperate to bring up a topic, now's your chance. Otherwise, do either Sarah or Robert want to just give a quick update on the KubeCon plans? I know we talk about this basically every time. I just think because it's Crusola, hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, has raised their hand. You can speak. Yeah, great. Nope. Okay. Well, if you manage to, you cannot unmute yourself. Let me see if I can unmute you. Nope, you cannot. If you I'm not quite sure why, but I can also not unmute you. I'm sorry. But if you want to just put your message in the chat, I will relay. Yep. Okay. Well, in the meanwhile, do we just want a quick update on KubeCon plans? Because not everyone's always in every single meeting, so.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, we have our booth. I've set up in a spreadsheet with the times when we need to be there. And I've been planning to, but there's been a lot of stuff going on. But I'm going to reach out to the various working groups and ask if they can take some shifts. I'll try to break it up in something that makes sense, and hopefully we can make it all go around. You know myself, I'm probably going to be in the booth anyway, so probably just hang out there. Have a place to stay.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so Krisa, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. I'm sorry that you can't speak up for yourself right now. I don't know why. But basically, is asking how to contribute. And I thank you so much for your question, because this is a question we get quite often. And I understand this is not super clear. And actually, I would like to take some time to make it more explicit on, for example, our website. So basically, how you can start contributing depends on what you want to do, what your interests are. I would say maybe the easiest way is to go into one of the working groups. We have currently 4 active ones. There's app development, there's artifacts, there's the platforms working group, and now the newly created infrastructure lifecycle working group. So the easiest way for you to find out if that's interesting for you is to go to our website, tag-app-delivery.cncf.io, go to working groups and read the charter of them and see if this is something that you find interesting, if you want to maybe contribute. A lot of them also kind of talk about what they want to work on, like the deliverables of their working groups. So you can see like, oh, this is maybe something that I want to contribute to. Often it's white papers. Right now, app development is working on a survey. Platforms is working, I think, still on the maturity model or like the user interviews. So it really depends on what you're interested in specifically. There's one thing that I also put on the agenda, which is localization issues. So we have a great community that speaks a lot of different languages, and we have currently a couple of pull requests open of translations of individual parts of our website. So there's Italian, French, Portuguese, the Brazilian Portuguese, and Korean. If you speak any of them or anyone else in this call, I would encourage you to look into the pull request, because we usually need a second pair of native language eyes. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but you know what I mean, to review, so we can make sure that the content of the translation is correct. So that's also something that you could help. There's also administrative tasks like taking notes, hosting these meetings, like helping out at KubeCon or helping with individual tasks that are just coming up. That if you're interested in that, we also sometimes review projects. So CNCF projects or projects that want to become CNCF projects, they will send an issue to the TOC, and then the TOC will ask them to present to us in this meeting, for example, and then we will write a little recommendation or summary after the presentation to give to the CNCF. So that's a lot of stuff that you can do, and it really, again, depends on what you're interested in. If it's not super clear right now, like I said a lot, just feel free to reach out in the Slack group. In the CNCF Slack, we have tag-app-delivery as a channel, and you can also, like if you just ask, if you follow the conversations, people will sometimes say, hey, we're working on this, we need help for that. Or you can also say, hey, I'm new, I want to contribute, what's something that I can contribute to. This is my expertise, these are my interests. Chances are someone will reach out. So I hope that helped. And it's good that you mentioned it, because it's just another motivation for me to put all this that I just said on the website, so it's clear. And William is saying, "Do speak Italian? Can you put the link of the PR in the Slack channel or DM me? I'm on phone." I think William, you already were mentioned or have opened the pull request yourself. You were it was translated by you, so you can't review. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's what you're talking about. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's the maturity model. No, you don't have to be sorry. It's all good. Thank you for your contribution.
Yeah, okay. I think I didn't sign the PR. I think there was a problem. Robert told me, but I got distracted with work things and I never got to it again.
I see. The DCO, you know, the sign off is technically just a change of the commit message in theory.
Okay.
I also don't really like, as long as we're in dialogue, I don't think it's that bad if we kind of just we can overwrite the DCO check.
Oh, I
And
see. Yeah.
so it's just I would prefer if people went through and did it themselves for various reasons, but if it gets issued, like when there's a bunch of commits and it gets kind of weird.
Yeah.
It gets weird sometimes.
The only
Understood.
thing about this pull request that I'm kind of yeah, so it does say in the message that it's reviewed by Nicolo, but Nicolo has not reacted in this pull request at all. And it's not that I don't trust you, William.
No,
but
I absolutely understand.
I would prefer it if he at least like thumbs upped it or something, so we have the paper trail later that he actually did see this pull request and actually gave, like, we can prove that he actually did.
Yeah, I can ask him. I can ask him to comment on that. Yeah, I will do.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Because the DCO, I didn't put it there. I don't really care, but the review I definitely want it in there.
I will do so.
Thank you so much. Cool. So the other pull requests, they are in the notes that I hope everyone can see and access. Otherwise, I'll just put it in here. So again, if you speak any of the languages or you speak another language that we don't have and you want to start translation, you can do that. And the way how to do it, I think, is on our website, question mark. I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, so if you go to contribute, there's a couple ways that you can contribute. Oh, writing a blog post. I forgot about that. You can write a blog post that is related in some way to app delivery. It needs to be vendor neutral. And it needs to, if you're going to talk about projects or tooling, I think they need to be CNCF projects. I don't know if it's good enough that they're just open source if they're not CNCF projects. But so far, it's been mainly, like, if you mention some CNCF projects and some of them are not, that's fine. If they are enterprise offerings, then we usually don't do that. Because this is all about community and open source. Yeah, and there's also a page about localization guidelines and how to contribute to the platform maturity model. Great. So I hope no one has anything anymore, because we have 3 minutes, and I would prefer if we don't start a new topic in those 3 minutes. I will gift them to you. Okay, great. Thank you everyone for coming. Again, if you have any questions or you want to talk about anything, suggestions, whatever, the easiest way to reach us is on the Slack, on the CNCF Slack, because I think we all see that the most. Otherwise, you can also create an issue in GitHub, but that might take a bit longer if you just want to get a reaction. Yeah. Cool. All right, then hope you all have a great day, and I will speak to you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Well,
Bye.